If you look back on your old episodes and you say, wow, they kind of suck, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. That means you probably took messy action in the beginning and you started when you should have. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Podcast Growth University, where we will talk all things podcasting all the time, I hope you enjoyed the latest episode. It was episode number 40, Social Media Matters for Different Reasons Than You Think. Today, for episode number 41, the importance of messy action. It is a beautiful 62-degree Fahrenheit day in New Hampshire. The window is open a little bit, but hopefully not enough where you can hear the birds chirping. So, what is messy action? Messy action is you saying, you know what, I know this isn't perfect, but it's good enough for me to launch. Now, I understand good enough is a dangerous term for many of us because it does not necessarily require us to improve. But I can tell you this with certainty. One of the biggest reasons most people don't get started is because they don't feel like they're good enough yet. It's almost like, if you think about it this way, I graduated high school in 2007. When I graduated high school, there was many people who went on to college. 4 years later, they came out of college, and this was a common saying at the time. Experience required. So if you were applying for a job, you were getting that saying. People were saying, oh, unfortunately, we can't hire you because for this position, there is experience required. But nobody could get hired to get the experience necessary. That's kind of what's happening with a lot of people. They're not getting started because they don't feel ready. But since they don't feel ready, they don't start. And since they don't start, they're never, ever, ever going to feel ready. We had somebody the other day who Alan was talking to. Again, Alan is the co-host and the CEO of our business. And he was talking to this person who is a listener. And this person said, yeah, I'm all in now. I'm excited to listen to all the episodes. I'm going to start from the beginning. And Alan was like, oh, be careful. Be careful because the old episodes kind of suck. Because in the beginning, that was just messy action. We didn't know what microphone did what. We didn't know how to audio edit. We didn't know how to do an intro and outro. We didn't know what we were doing. Because in the beginning, you're taking messy action. You're just trying to get the reps in. The first portrait you paint is not going to be good. The first music video you create is probably going to suck. The first song you write is probably not going to be good. That's kind of par for the course. But I think when it comes to something like a podcast where it's so public and it's so personal, it's hard to get judged on stuff like that. But there's a lot of people out there who they just need to give themselves a little bit of proof. The current proof that a lot of people have is I can't do it, therefore I won't do it. But if you don't do it, you're never going to believe that you can do it. So that's kind of the theme behind today's episode. One of the things I talk about often, not just in podcasting, but just in life, is messy action. You don't have to have the end completely set up when you start. Truthfully, you can't really have the end fully set up until you start, right? And a lot of us are trying to figure out, well, I want this to be perfect. Nothing will ever be perfect until you start. And if you think of it from like a recipe standpoint, all a recipe is its directions to create something. Well, how did that thing get created in the first place? By somebody taking messy action and say, well, I know eggs do this and flour does this and sugar does this and in this, like, okay, cool, butter does this, awesome. Let me mix these all up and take messy action and see what happens. Oh, it's too dry. Oh, it's, the cake shrunk, whatever it may be. So you're not going to get any results if you're not willing to take some messy action. We had an interview one time. So Alan and I, this was in the middle of COVID maybe. I don't remember the exact month, but we had been planning on getting a custom podcast studio. And we ended up getting a studio. And during COVID, obviously everything was virtual. And at that point, Alan and I had never really done virtual video interviews. We had done them in the past where we would have the audio from the person, but we never recorded video because that just wasn't one of our focuses. So we moved into the studio and we ended up getting a nice camera and we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we use this camera as a webcam, much like I'm doing right now if you're watching me on YouTube. And we ended up getting one of the biggest guests we've ever had. His name's Dean Graziosi. He's a best-selling author multiple times. He's, spoken all over the world with Tony Robbins and Brendan Burchard, all the big people in our industry. So we get this interview with him. And when we logged on, to interview him, our camera was garbage. We weren't using it the right way, and the picture was all messed up. And you could tell when he logged on that he was like, oh no, I've made a mistake here. Now, luckily, we added a lot of value and our questions are really good, but that was a huge mistake. But that was us taking messy action. We had just gotten a new studio. We had a brand new setup. We were using a camera or the camera in a new way. We were using a capture card and all these HDMI cables and different software, and we didn't know what we were doing. But that mistake allowed us to improve. And the next time we got somebody to be interviewed virtually, we made sure it was much, much better. So the understanding I think that we all need to have is there really is no episode that's going to make you or break you. Now, yes, in extreme circumstances, if you somehow get to interview Taylor Swift or The Rock, that episode could really, really, really help you. And yes, if you get into a fist fight live on your podcast or you say something very hateful about somebody, yeah, maybe you can take a tumble overnight. But for the vast majority of us, that's not going to happen. That's why messy action is so important.
Hey, Kevin, Kim here. Just wanted to send you a video to say thank you so much for your help on creating the Peaceful Productivity Podcast. I couldn't have done it without you. I knew you'd be lots of great help with the technical aspects of getting the podcast going, but you went well above and beyond that. You helped me with the strategy and you gave me all kinds of really great support. I think the key to success in business is a great attitude, and you have that in spades. You really walk the walk. So thanks again. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
In the beginning, you're working out your mistakes. As you get further and further and further in, your mistakes become less noticeable. I will make a bunch of mistakes in here. You might not notice them, though, because you might say, wow, Kevin has all these episodes, so he must know what he's talking about. I misspeak all the time, but the way I misspeak is just different than it used to be because we started with messy action. Another thing when it comes to messy action, this is very, very, very important. When a client comes to me, I'm always thinking of the main thing I'm thinking really is how do I make this as easy as possible for this show to get launched? What do I mean by that? I have some clients who come to me and say, hey, tell me what camera to get, tell me what microphone to get, tell me what backdrop to get, tell me how to do everything. I want the nicest stuff I can get. Okay. I also have other clients where I know if they have to buy a bunch of equipment that they don't understand, they're not going to start their show. So the messy action for them is, yeah, here's the microphone I would suggest. It plugs right into your laptop. Don't worry about getting a new camera. Don't worry about your backdrop. Honestly, don't worry about any of that. Let's just get this thing rolling. I just want them to see some results. I want them to feel what messy action feels like because for them, they're looking for progress. And honestly, they don't really understand that their action is messy because we're the ones doing the messy action behind the scenes. So if you are the type of person who is saying, you know what, it's not the right time because of blank, 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 and blank. Obviously, that can be true at times, but if you are a perfectionist, you most likely will never get started. You most likely never will. When Alan and I lived in Florida, we lived in Florida for a month. One of our mentors hosted us at his house. And the main reason we went down there was because we wanted to record online courses. And I ended up recording my online course. And when I finished, I told Alan, I said, it's good enough. I mean, it's not perfect. There's a lot of room for improvement, but I got to get it out there and I got to get feedback and it's okay. It's done, right? Done is far better than perfect. Alan waited till I think 2 days before we were leaving, recorded it and said, it's not good enough. And I don't think he ever ended up releasing it. Now, again, my course wasn't great. It didn't live for a long time. I ended up getting rid of it eventually, but I needed that lesson. I needed that practice. I needed to see what it was like to record a course, and we've recorded several since. I just think one of the biggest things for people is this, and especially as a podcaster, right? Like, you might not feel like you're ready to do solo episodes. It's worth trying. If it goes horribly wrong, you don't have to air it. You might not feel like you're ready to have a certain guest on. That's okay. If it goes horribly wrong, you don't have to air it. You might not feel like you're ready to do coaching. That's okay. Try to coach somebody for free and see what it feels like. I think for a lot of us, we're waiting on a feeling that we can't get until we do the thing that we're afraid of. So that was my goal in this episode. If you look back on your old episodes and you say, wow, they kind of suck, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. That means you probably took messy action in the beginning and you started when you should have. If you start a podcast and it's super easy and you're the best at it, you probably waited too long because you could have gotten better faster if you started earlier. So I'll throw that out there. But that's it. That's the goal in this episode. That's the point of this episode is a lot of us are waiting on perfect. We're waiting on ideal. And yes, in an ideal world, things would go a certain way. But for most of us, it's the experience necessary. That's where we're going to get the experience. We're not necessarily going to get the experience by winning or taking perfect action or taking ideal action or taking the aligned action in the aligned way, in the aligned time. That doesn't happen for most of us. And I think the longer you wait, the harder this gets. I have met so many people, very successful people, who say, yeah, I'm going to start a podcast. And when I say successful, I mean they will be on the top charts immediately when they launch their podcast. The problem is they're always waiting. Well, my backdrop isn't good enough. My whatever, this isn't good enough. The guests I can get aren't good enough, whatever it may be. When in reality, when you drop an episode, it's going to do well anyway. You're getting in your own way with that stuff. So I guess that's my battle cry for this episode. If you're getting in your own way because you're afraid to take messy action, ask yourself, if I don't start taking messy action, when am I going to take action at all? Because there is no such thing as perfect. Ideal is, I think, far more outside of the realm of our reach than we realize. And we are always going to be taking imperfect action because you're a human and you and I and everybody else are imperfect. So that is the jam for today. Quick one today. I got a coaching call coming up here shortly, so I got to pop off. As always, if you are a podcaster, which you most likely are because you're listening to this, or you're somebody who wants to start a podcast, click the link in the show notes for a free 30-minute call with myself. We will jam on the title of your podcast, who the podcast is serving, what your avatar looks like, what you should do with your business model, how to get more listens, how to get more listeners, how to get better guests, whatever it is. If I can't add value, I will tell you, hey, that just isn't my strength zone. So I will jump on the Zoom with you and we will chat. And hopefully it will be valuable. It usually is, and people usually leave with way more than they think they're going to get. So if you're interested, click the link in the show notes below. Next week, for episode number 42, I'm excited about this one. Your podcast isn't about you. It's about the audience. Not just when it comes to what you say into the microphone, but the way your business is set up, everything. Everything is about the audience, not about you. So make sure you tune in for that episode number 42 next week. As always, I appreciate you all very, very much. We're 42 episodes in. If you ever have any questions or you want me to do a certain episode on something, please do not hesitate to reach out. I will make sure that I anonymously do the episode. I won't drop your first and last name. But if you ever have any questions and you want to hear an episode on it, please let me know. I'd be happy to do it. Until next week, I love you all. I appreciate you all. I'm grateful for you all. Keep on podcasting. Keep on crushing it. And we will talk next week.